Good morning. Welcome to our study this morning. We're continuing our creation series. We're on lesson 9 today. We're going to look at 3 videos from Kent Hovind called Evolution Exposed. I have been researching, trying to find a good video with questions to ask evolutionists, but really couldn't find any that I thought were great. So I do like this Evolution Exposed series, and thought that we would watch it and that we would write our own questions for evolutionists based on what we learn from these. So this will be a little bit of a hands-on experience for you to watch and say, oh, that's a good question to ask. And then we'll pick up at near the end. I think we'll have time to get started in the fraudulent textbook information. That, however, is a 2.5-hour presentation, so we'll have to carry that over to next week or even the week after. Well, probably the week after, where we will go through all of the textbook errors that he has gathered. So we'll do that for the next this week and probably 2 more. Then we'll probably look at all of the questions that we have gathered related to evolution and look at a comparison of old Earth and new Earth creationists and come to some conclusions about that as well. And that should end our study on creation and our special on creation. So let's begin with a word of prayer. If you need to, you can use this time to confess any known sins to the Father, so that you might be forgiven and cleansed of all unrighteousness, and walk in the Spirit so that you may hear the Holy Spirit speak to you as we look at these things today. So please pray with me. Father, as we look at these things today, we ask for the Holy Spirit's insight into them, putting them into our memory banks so that when we are faced with situations where this information will be of value in witnessing to others, that we'll be able to recall it and be able to utilize it appropriately to show truth in the darkness of evolution. We thank you for our time together and ask that you bless it in Jesus' name. Amen. If someone will get the lights, we'll go ahead and start this.
The word evolution has at least 6 different meanings. First, we have cosmic evolution. That would be the Big Bang. Then we'd have to have chemical evolution. See, the Big Bang supposedly made hydrogen. Well, how did we get 92 elements, plus the synthetic ones? How did the chemicals evolve? They don't talk about that much, but that would have to happen. Thirdly, we'd have to have stellar and planetary evolution. Did you know the stars would have to evolve? Then we'd have to have organic evolution. That would be the origin of life. How did life get started from non-living material? Fifthly, we would have macroevolution. That is where an animal changes into a different kind of animal. Finally, we have microevolution. Now, I don't like this word, okay, because it gets people confused. I think we ought to just call it a variation. But microevolution happens, folks. That is a fact of science. Animals produce a variety of offspring, but it's always the same kind. The first 5 definitions of evolution are stupid. It doesn't happen. It's certainly not part of science. It's something you have to believe in. They teach the kids it all started with the Big Bang 20 billion years ago. A Big Bang. This is what the textbooks teach. 18 to 20 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was concentrated into one very dense, very hot region that may have been much smaller than a period on this page. So this one says, all the matter in the universe was drawn into this little tiny dot, and it spun faster and faster. This is what they teach the kids. Some kids doing this for homework tonight, right? It spun faster and faster. One day, it exploded. Big Bang. I was talking to a professor from Berkeley one time. I was sitting on the airplane next to a professor from Berkeley University. And we got talking about the Big Bang, and he said he believed in the Big Bang theory.
Here comes the first question to ask.
I said, tell me, sir, how did the universe get here? He said, well, 20 billion years ago, all the matter was squished in this little tiny dot, and it was spinning real fast, and it exploded. Big Bang. And pieces flew off and became the galaxies and the sun, the moon, the stars, and finally, people. Here we are. I said, does Berkeley have a merry-go-round? He said, no, we don't have a merry-go-round at Berkeley. I said, you ought to get one. You could learn some good science on a merry-go-round. Wasn't fourth graders on the merry-go-round? I like using fourth graders because they're tough and they're expendable. And we're going to get the high school football team out there to get that thing spinning clockwise as fast as it will possibly go. We're going to spin the merry-go-round clockwise. The kids are going to go through 4 phases. They start off in phase 1. They're screaming at the football players. Come on, let's go, faster, faster. Can't you go any faster? You get up around 30 miles an hour. The kids enter phase 2, where they stop screaming. They just quietly concentrate on trying to hang on for dear life. You get up around 60 miles an hour. The kids enter phase 3, where they start screaming again. But now they're screaming, stop, stop, please, slow down. Don't stop, though. Keep going faster and faster. When you get to about 100 miles an hour, you should enter phase 4. That's where the kids begin to fly off the merry-go-round. Now, when this happens, you will notice a very interesting phenomena of physics. If the merry-go-round is going clockwise, when the kid flies off, the kid will be spinning clockwise until he encounters resistance, like a tree or telephone pole. That's because of a law in physics known as the conservation of angular momentum. You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will all spin the same direction. It's very simple. It's because the outside is moving faster than the inside. And so it keeps the same direction of spin. The professor said, yes, I understand about the conservation of angular momentum. I said, well, good. I'd like to ask you a question then, sir. If the whole universe began as a swirling dot, like you said, why do 2 planets spin backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, that's more than interesting. It's kind of hard on your Big Bang Theory. Not only that, 6 of the moons are spinning backwards. Why? He said, I don't know. By the way, if the Big Bang Theory were true, the matter would be evenly distributed. But it's not. It's lumpy. They're called galaxies. And in zillions of miles and nothing called voids. And to try to salvage the dumb Big Bang Theory, they've got all these wild theories of why isn't the matter evenly distributed? They'll say, well, maybe there's black holes, or maybe there's antimatter. They got all this stuff. It's all trying to rescue this crazy Big Bang Theory. And it's a dud, folks. It didn't happen. Then they tell the kids the Earth formed from a hot molten mass 4.6 billion years ago. This is part of the theory, and it's in all the textbooks. 4.6 billion years ago, Earth cooled down, formed a rocky crust. I think that is stupid, and I'll show you why. Was the Earth ever really a hot molten mass 4.6 billion years ago, and it cooled down? This textbook says, as Earth formed, the surface was like the moon. There were hot pools of bubbling lava. I don't think so. My Bible says the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So the Earth was not created a hot molten mass. It was created under water, which means it has to be less than 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees centigrade, or it wouldn't be water, it'd be steam. So the Earth was never a hot molten mass according to Scripture. Then when you look in the granite rocks, you find little tiny halos made of polonium. Now these polonium halos are absolutely amazing. Robert Gentry, a friend of mine from Knoxville, Tennessee area, he has been studying radiopolonium halos for a long time. These little polonium halos are interesting because they have a half-life of less than a few minutes. If the rock was hot, when the radioactive polonium decayed and sent out the little particles and made the halo, it would melt away. Like at 4th of July, they shoot fireworks up. Makes a circle. Does the circle stay there? No, it all falls down, right? There are probably none up there now from the last 4th of July, are there? You'd have to freeze the whole atmosphere to keep that sphere in place. This polonium would have to be decaying in a rock that is already solid. So the Earth was never a hot molten mass. Get Robert Gentry's book if you want a lot more on that.
Did you get the second question? Did you get a second question there? How was the Earth created a hot molten mass if polonium in the rocks show that it never was hot?
But all over, the granites all over the world contain these polonium halos. So it is stupid to say the Earth was a hot molten mass. We have scientific evidence it was not. Here they tell the kids, though, the Earth was hot with large pools of bubbling lava, and that is just stupid. It can't possibly be true. Then they tell them life got started about 3 billion years ago. See, according to the theory, 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang. 4.6 billion years ago the Earth cooled down, formed a hard rocky crust. and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup. And the soup came alive about 3 billion years ago. This is what the books teach. This fellow says, both the origin of life and the origin of major groups of animals remains unknown. How did life get started anyway? Well, this textbook tells the kids, oceans formed as it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Yes, boys and girls, millions of years of torrential rains created great oceans. And swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. This one says the first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. I was asked me to speak at this college in Boston one time. I got my charts out and I said, now folks, I believe the Bible. Nobody cheered. I said, I believe about 6,000 years ago God made everything. The world's not millions of years old. 4.6 billion years ago, there was a big flood. I'm sorry, 4,400 years ago, there was a big flood, not 4.6. And 2,000 years ago, Jesus came, and I gave them the basic Bible story, okay? Then I told them what they believe. Because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago, the earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. And this early life form found somebody to marry. Boy, now that's a good trick. And something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. I seem to do that to them. He said, Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. I said, yes, sir, you're right about that. He said, you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off of Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? Ha, ha, ha. I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock. I had one lady come to me after a debate one time. She was steaming down the aisle, boy, she was mad. Oh, I could tell I'm in trouble now. I stood there quivering in my boots, you know. She walked up and she said, tonight you said we believe we come from a rock. We do not believe that. I said, well, ma'am, calm down just for a minute. I said, do you believe in evolution? She said, yes, I do. I'm a professor here at the university. I said, well, would you please tell me then where we came from? She said, we came from a macromolecule. I said, where did that come from? She said, from the oceans, from the prebiotic soup. I said, where did that come from? She said, well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. And you could see it was slowly dawning on her. I do believe I come from a rock, don't I? I was in a debate one time, and we had question and answer time at the end. The student stood up and he said to the evolutionist, he said, sir, how did male and female evolve? The professor got up and he said, well, that is a giant mother may I step in the evolution story. A mother may I step? This is science. Wow. Well, so according to them, you know, for the next few billion years or hundreds of millions of years, you know, life learned to produce something other than its own kind. Of course, today everything only produces its own kind, but they say long ago and far away, they were able to do something different. Textbooks will say we started like a bacteria and slowly evolved to a human. I think that's stupid. Those trees of life that they put in the textbooks for your kids are a bunch of nonsense. And even evolutionists will admit that. Stephen Jay Gould, the Marxist professor at Harvard University, he says that evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks are not the evidence of fossils. It's only inference. We infer, we imply, we hope it happened this way. This textbook says, all the many forms of life on earth today are descended from a common ancestor. What? You mean the birds and the bananas have a common ancestor? Isn't that what he says? Found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. Well, in the first place, there's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism, okay? One single cell is more complex than a space shuttle. There's no such thing as a primitive single-celled organism. We talk about that on video number 4 of our series. But he says, all the forms of life are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. What were those first cells like? How do we know? What events led up to their formation? No traces of those events remain. Did you catch that? Hey kid, we know what happened, but there's no proof. Primitive, huh? This one says, the humans, mammals, birds, crocodiles, all had a common ancestor. Well, anything inside that circle is religious speculation. It is stupid. Reptiles produce reptiles, dogs produce dogs, people produce people, and there's never been an exception to that. Darwin said, though, if my theory be true, here's his book right here. You can look on page 211. He said, if my theory be true, numberless intermediate varieties must assuredly have existed. Boy, you're right about that, Charlie. I mean, to change from a rock to a dog would take a few changes. David Robb, who believes in evolution very strongly, says, in the years after Darwin, his advocates hoped to find predictable progressions. In general, these have not been found, yet the optimism has died hard, and some pure fantasy has crept into textbooks. Oh, you're kidding. Fantasy in our textbooks? Oh, yep. They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so. Luther Sunderland asked all the major evolutionists, he said, where is the evidence for evolution? They all said, well, somebody else has it. We don't have it over here. So he wrote a letter to Colin Patterson. He's the director of the British Museum of Natural History. They've got the largest fossil collection in the world. He said, Mr. Patterson, I read your book on evolution. I noticed you didn't show us the missing links. Why didn't you show us the missing links? Patterson wrote back and said, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line, there is not one such fossil. There are no missing links, folks.
Where are the transitions? Where are the missing links? Darwin said there had to be. Numerous, everywhere. Well, every transition from every one species to another would have to have a transition. And probably more than one. You'd have to have perhaps several, but nobody ever finds them. And now what they will tell you, and we covered this in one of the previous videos, is like the moth that we looked at last week, that's evidence of transition from one to another. A moth transitions to another moth, to a moth, okay? But that's what they'll say, that's the transition, the missing links. They say, no, I want a missing link between one kind and another kind, one species and another.
Kangaroo.
Right, yeah. And of course they don't have it. Because they don't have anything. It's pretty amazing how all of this is built on nothing, isn't it?
No chain is missing. Even Stephen Gould admitted the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution. We got the theory, we know it's true, now we just need the evidence. That's the way they think about it. Richard Goldschmidt.
Did you hear what he said? We know that this is true, all we need now is the evidence.
Maybe the first bird hatched from a reptile egg. Oh, Richard, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's stupid. See, what's happened, these guys have looked for missing links in the fossil record. They can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out. Well, who did that bird marry? There's only about a zillion differences between a reptile and a bird. Here's what happened. Charlie Darwin graduated from Bible college to be a preacher in the Anglican Church in 1830. He couldn't get a job, so his dad pulled a few strings and got him a job on board HMS Beagle. He's going to sail around the world and collect bugs. And while he's sailing around, he stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. There on those islands, Charlie noticed there were 14 different varieties of finches. Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what, I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. And then Charlie said in his book on page 170, he said, "It is a truly wonderful fact that all animals and all plants throughout all time and space should be related to each other." Now hold on a minute. You see 14 kinds of birds and you conclude that birds and bananas are related. That's stupid. You should conclude that those 14 kinds of birds had a common ancestor, but that's as far as it ever goes, folks, okay? I don't know of a kind way to say it, Charlie, but that's stupid. Okay, we don't ever see a bird produce a non-bird. See, dogs produce dogs, and you might get quite a variety of dogs. Roses produce roses. That is called microevolution. Now that is a fact, folks. It happens. It is observable. It is scientific. I don't think we ought to use that word, microevolution. We should just call it a variation. But they use it, so just so I qualify that, it's a lousy term. It gives what's called a free rider effect to the rest of the 5 religious ideas of evolution. You might get a big dog or a little dog, but you're always going to get a dog when you crossbreed your dogs. And I would go so far as to say probably the dog, the wolf, and the coyote had a common ancestor. This Irish textbook shows different dogs and it calls it divergent evolution. Oh, come on, giving it a fancy name doesn't change a thing. It is still a dog. See, variations happen within the dog kind. You get a big dog or a little dog. That's not evolution. That's just a variation of the same kind, okay? And the information for that variety was already present in the gene pool. No new information is ever added. The dogs or the pigs don't learn to fly or become pink. Okay, there's no new information added, just scrambled information. And the gene pool of the new variety is now more limited than before. Somebody spent years crossbreeding dogs to develop a Chihuahua. Genetic information was lost when you got your variation. It wasn't added. You might have selected a certain slice of the gene pool with small dog, quick characteristics, but you didn't add anything. You selected something from the population. I come from Illinois, corn country. There are so many kinds of corn up there, they have to number them. You'll be driving down the highway, you'll see BX65, don't mix it up with XL29, something will blow up. But I'll tell you what, folks, you can crossbreed your corn from now till the cows come home, and you always get corn. You'll never get a hamster or a tomato or a whale to grow on that corn stalk, okay? It won't happen. There's a variety of cows, and they probably had a common ancestor. It was a cow. Variety of horses, no question. Probably the zebra and the horse had a common ancestor. But the kids are going to be taught in school tomorrow in your town that the horse used to have 4 toes. Well, there's some things they don't tell the kids about this Eohippus to Equus series, which has been proven wrong 50 years ago, but still is in your textbooks right here in this town. They don't tell them the original so-called horse is the size of a fox. It was a meat eater and had 18 pairs of ribs. The next one had 15 pairs of ribs. A couple of trips through the buzzsaw did that. And then it miraculously grew back 19 pairs of ribs as it evolved, and then back to 18. They also don't tell them the whole thing's been proven wrong a long time ago. Like this guy says in the biology textbook, other examples like the gradual evolution of the horse have not held up under close examination. That's a polite way of saying it's proven wrong, okay? This G.G. Simpson back in 1950 said the example of the horse family has been unintentionally falsified. They knew 50 years ago this was false. Why did they keep that in your textbooks? This whole thing was made up by Othniel C. Marsh in 1874. He picked animals from all over the world and put them in order the way he thought it might have happened. They were never found in that order. Modern horses are found in the same layers as the so-called ancient Equus or Eohippus horse. They're found in the same layer. So it can't be the ancestor, that's for sure. The ancient horse is nothing but a Hyracotherium, which is still alive today. Peabody Museum still has the horse evolution on display. As I stood there, I've been there many times, makes my blood boil every time I walk in that place. I'm standing there looking at this lie proven wrong 50 years ago while hundreds of kids come through in school groups. The kids are never told, well, this has been proven wrong, boys and girls. Then they're going to tell the kids, well, we have evidence for this theory. We think that one animal changed another, and we can show evidence because many animals have similar forelimb structure. This is called the argument from homology. Well, what do they tell the kids? They'll say, boys and girls, you have 2 bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has 2 bones in his flipper, and they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow, who named them, teacher? The whale? Think about it. But this is one of the evidences for evolution. They're going to say, boys and girls, comparative anatomy provides further evidence of evolution. The commonalities suggest that these and other vertebrate animals are all related. They probably evolved from a common ancestor. Well, duh. That's stupid, okay? Maybe they all had the same designer. Doesn't prove a common ancestor. By the way, the bones develop from different genes in these different organisms. They are not homologous organisms like they want you to believe. Charlie Lyell, back in 1830, he was a lawyer from Scotland. He and other fellows back in that time, Cuvier, Stratus Smith, and some of these guys, they invented the geologic column. How many have ever heard of the geologic column before? They say each of the layers is a different age, you know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic, all them Zoic boys. And they gave each layer of rock a name, like maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park, and an age, and an index fossil. This was done in 1830, way before there ever was a carbon dating, or potassium argon dating, or lead-208, lead-206, uranium-235, uranium-238. Didn't exist, folks. The dating technique didn't exist. They just made up these numbers out of the clear blue sky. The geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionist. It can only be found one place in the world: the textbooks. There's no geologic column, and they know it. This fellow says, if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. The geologic column is a hoax. Does not exist. It is stupid. Those layers cannot be different ages. If the geologic column were all in one place, it would be 100 miles thick. If the geologic column were true, if you look at the side of Grand Canyon and see all these thousands of layers, why are there no erosion marks between the layers? Don't you think if one layer sat there for 10 million years waiting for the next one, it would...
That sounds like a question. As a matter of fact, it is a question. He just asked it.
Once or twice? No erosion marks between the layers. Interesting. Years ago, I was preaching in Union Center, South Dakota. The preacher said, hey, Brother Hovind, let's go down to Rapid City, South Dakota. They've got a museum down there with a bunch of dinosaur bones. I said, all right, I like dinosaurs, let's go. The first place we stopped on the tour was the geologic time scale, the big chart. They got it behind glass so the kids can't touch it. You know, this is holy, sacred. And the guide said, now, boys and girls, this layer of rock right here is about 70 million years old. My daughter was 12 at the time. She raised her hand. She said, mister, how do you know that layer is 70 million years old? He said, well, honey, we tell the age of the layers by what kind of fossils we find in them. They're called index fossils. Oh, she said, thank you, sir. We walked around the other side of the dinosaur, and we're standing over here, and the guide said, now, folks, these bones you're looking at are about 100 million years old. My daughter raised her hand again. She said, mister, how do you know those bones are 100 million years old? He said, honey, that's a good question. We tell the age of the bones by which layer they come from. She said, excuse me, sir, but when we were standing over there, you told me you knew the age of the layers by the bones, and now you're telling me you know the age of the bones by the layers. She said, isn't that circular reasoning? He looked back at my daughter. He said, you know, you're right. That is circular reasoning. I never thought of that before. Folks, geologic column is a joke. It doesn't exist. It's all based on circular reasoning. We can demonstrate that clearly. Get our video number 4 if you want more information on how it's all based on circular reasoning. I'll just give you a couple of quotes here. This guy says, the rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately.
That's funny. Video 4 is the one that we're going to watch.
I still want to go to my school and see what.
What's that?
I said it really is. I still want to go to my school and see what people are saying.
Same things.
Stratigraphy cannot avoid this kind of reasoning if it insists on using only temporal concepts, because circularity is inherent. You have to use circular reasoning to get it right. Well, that's stupid. They tell the kids each of these layers is a different age. 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, real impressive, huge numbers. Now, Charlie Darwin did not like round numbers. He wanted to be more precise. He said the Wealdian deposits are 306,662,400 years old. Those layers are not different ages, folks. All over the world we find petrified trees standing up, running through multiple rock layers. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages.
27 layers of forest at Specimen Ridge, Yellowstone, Wyoming, have broken off roots and extend through many layers they did not grow there. There are numerous examples of trees growing through layers that are said to be hundreds of millions of years different in age. So you have one tree that grew through 400 million years ago, 300 million years ago. That's a really old tree. It grew a long time.
Petrified trees in the vertical position. They find them all over the world. Okay, here's one from Alabama. Come out of a seam of coal, through 20 feet of rock, into another seam of coal. They found about 3 dozen of them, I think, in that one little coal mine, one little area, while they're digging the coal out. Petrified trees standing up. Cookeville, Tennessee. They found a bunch of them. This one's 30 feet tall, standing up. Joggins, Nova Scotia is famous for their petrified trees standing up in the vertical position. All over the area there, folks. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down. Then they're going to tell the students one of the evidences for evolution is embryology. Ernst Haeckel, an embryology professor at the University of Jena in Germany, he was an embryology professor, the study of animals before they're born. You know, the different embryos of all these different animals. He made drawings that were fake to make them look alike. The students are taught we have evidence from development. I don't think so. The similarity between early stages in development of many different animals helped convince Darwin that all forms of life shared common ancestors. Actually, Darwin considered this by far the strongest single class of evidence class of facts in favor of his theory. This is stupid, folks. I'll show you. This textbook says, the human embryo growing in the mother has gills like a fish. Those little folds of skin are not gills, okay? Excuse me. Those little wrinkles under your chin when you're growing up later develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. They never have anything to do with breathing. I've seen folks that have 5 or 6 chins and they can't breathe through any of them but the top one. Those are not gill slits. Ernst Haeckel, though, said the turning point in his thinking was when he read Darwin's book, 1860. Haeckel took a drawing of a dog and a human embryo and he changed them to make them look exactly alike.
He's entertaining as well as...
Yeah, he is good. Talks kind of fast sometimes.
His fake drawings looked almost identical. On top are the real drawings, underneath are Haeckel's fake drawings. He lied, folks, intentionally.
See the real? See the fake? Looks like the same drawing down there, doesn't it? They don't look anything alike up here. But when you have a belief system, the facts don't matter.
He made huge charts of his posters of his drawings of these embryos and traveled all over Germany and just about by himself converted the Germans to believing in evolution. Which later led to the obvious question, well, if evolution is true, then maybe one of the races of people has developed farther than the rest. Which, by the way, is a subtitle to Charlie Darwin's book. You can look at it for yourself. The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. See, Darwin was a racist. On top are Haeckel's fake drawings. Underneath are actual photographs of what he claimed he was drawing a picture of. Now, either he's a lousy artist or he's a liar. Well, it turns out he's a liar. He was convicted of fraud by his own university. Proven to be a fraud. But guess what? Haeckel's fake drawings are still used in textbooks in your state right now. Here's a textbook used at the University of West Florida, in the middle of the Bible Belt. It's only been proven wrong 125 years ago. Those are not gill slits on the embryo. Here's an Irish textbook. I was just there a few months ago. It says the embryo has gill slits. That's baloney. This one says the embryo has gills. Glencoe Biology says they have gills. Proven wrong 125 years ago. This biology textbook says the human embryo has gills. Here's this Tim Barra writing his book on the myth of creationism. And he mentions the gills are evidence for evolution. You're only 115 years behind, Tim. Miller's still teaching it 125 years after it was proven wrong. There's a college textbook still teaching the kids the embryo has gills. This one says, it shows the kids a 5 to 6 week embryo, but it says by 7 months, the fetus looks from the outside like a tiny normal baby, but it's not. It's not a baby at 7 months. Excuse me? A whole bunch of kids born at 5.5 months survive, 34%. Why do they keep that in the textbooks? Well, that's the only way to justify abortion. They want you to think it's not a human yet. Just a fish with gills. Then they're going to tell the kids, we've got evidence for evolution because dinosaurs turned to birds. This is stupid. Somewhere along the line, while his front legs are developing into wings, they're going to be half leg, half wing, which means he can't run and he can't fly yet. He's going to have a hard time, isn't he? No, dinosaurs did not turn into birds. That is stupid, okay? They say, we've got proof that they did. Archaeopteryx, which means ancient wing. That's supposed to be evidence for evolution. It's in just about every textbook I've seen dealing with this topic. Archaeopteryx is supposed to be evidence. Here's a 1999 textbook. Now, Archaeopteryx was proven to be a fraud in 1986. So this author is 13 years behind the time. Archaeopteryx means ancient wing. They're going to say, see, boys and girls, he's got claws on his wings. Yeah, so? 12 birds today have claws on their wings. The ostrich does, the Watson does, Turako does, ibis does. So what? It's kind of unusual, but 12 birds have it. They're going to say, well, he's got teeth in his beak. That proves he's got a reptilian feature. Well, now wait a minute. Some reptiles have teeth, some don't. Some mammals have teeth, some don't. Some fish have teeth, some don't. Some of you have teeth, some don't. Okay? That doesn't prove a thing, all right? Alan Fiducia is considered one of the world's experts on birds. He believes in evolution. University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He said, paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleo-babble is going to change that. It's a bird. By the way, even by their twisted thinking, birds are found in layers lower than Archaeopteryx. If you find fully formed birds in rock that you think is 130 million years old, then Archaeopteryx at 65 million years old cannot be a missing link, can it? Because birds were already here. Even with their dumb geologic column, it doesn't work. They're going to tell...
Question.
Something about the birds in the year. You said it's older than it is.
Fully formed birds, 130 million years ago. Archaeopteryx, the missing link between reptiles and birds, 65 million years ago. How can the missing link be 65 million years behind the animal it was supposed to transition to? Fully formed crows, 130 million years ago. In rocks dated because they have other fossils that they think were 130 million years ago.
Kids, we've got evidence for evolution. It works by natural selection. Well, yeah, natural selection works, but see, evolution is based on two faulty assumptions. Number one, they say mutations make something new. That's never been observed. And natural selection makes it survive. That's never been observed. That sounds good theoretically, but it's never been observed. Mutations happen, there's no question. Okay, thousands and thousands of mutations happen. But even guys like Pierre Gross will say, no matter how numerous they may be, mutations do not produce any kind of evolution. They're only scrambling existing information. They're not adding anything new. Here's a five-legged bull. That's a mutant. There's no new information added. Doesn't the bull already have the gene code to make a leg? You just built one in the wrong place, that's all. They tell them evolution and natural selection go together. He says, this textbook says natural selection causes evolution. That's stupid, okay? Natural selection doesn't cause any evolution. Natural selection is a conservative process that keeps the species strong. That's all it does. That's all it can do. It has no creative properties. Natural selection, nature can only select what there is to select from. If I said, I'm going to go around the world, I'm going to try to raise a race of people that are over 12 feet tall. So everybody under 12 feet tall, we're going to kill them. Year after year, we kill everybody under 12 feet tall. Well, there's nobody to select from, is there? Natural selection can only select what there is to select from. It's a conservative process. If you worked in a factory that produced cars, and your job was to check for defects, you know, kick the tires, slam the doors, etc., drive it around, and you caught every single mistake, and you rejected it, how long would it take that process to change the car to an airplane? You say it'll never change it. That's my point. Natural selection is like a quality control. It makes sure the bad ones don't survive, but it's not going to change it to something else. Survival of the fittest does not explain arrival of the fittest. And by the way, survival of the fittest is what is called a tautology. A tautology is a sentence that means nothing. I'll show you how it works. You say, Professor, why did it survive? I say, oh, because it's the fittest. You know, survival of the fittest. Oh, how do you know it's the fittest? Because it survived. I see. Is that the way it works? That's exactly the way it works. Sir Arthur Keith was selected to write the foreword to Darwin's book when it was republished in 1959 because he was a strong believer in evolution. Arthur Keith said, evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it because the only alternative is special creation. And that is... So everybody under 12 feet tall, we're going to kill them. Year after year, we kill everybody under 12 feet tall. Well, there's nobody to select from, is there? Natural selection can only select what there is to select from. It's a conservative process. If you worked in a factory that produced cars,
This quote coming up, I think you should write down and save.
and your job was to check for defects, you know, kick the tires, slam the doors, etc., drive it around, and you caught every single mistake and you rejected it. How long would it take that process to change the car to airplane? You say you'll never change it. That's not right. Natural selection is like a quality control. It makes sure the bad ones don't survive. It's not going to change it to something else. Survival of the fittest does not explain arrival of the fittest. And by the way, survival of the fittest is what is called a tautology. A tautology is a sentence that means nothing. I'll show you how it works. You say, Professor, why did it survive? I say, oh, because it's the fittest. You know, survival of the fittest. Oh, how do you know it's the fittest? Because it survived. I see. Is that the way it works? That's exactly the way it works. Sir Arthur Keith was selected to write the foreword to Darwin's book when it was republished in 1959 because he was a strong believer in evolution. Arthur Keith said, evolution is...
Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable. Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable. Sir Arthur Keith. Sounds like a religion to me.
And he wrote
Hopefully
forward
signs it.
in Darwin's book,
Yep, the 100th
And he-
anniversary
and-
edition.
and he wrote that.
Well, yeah.
That is hilarious.
Totally scientific reasoning right there.
Uh-huh.
That would be the words that you would. Well, here it is.
Yeah, here's the truth. This is the basis of evolution, right here. This is the whole basis of evolution. It is what guides evolution. It's what perpetuates evolution. Is that it's a belief. And it's a belief not because of evidence, but because of a refusal to accept creation. And that's unthinkable. Why is it unthinkable? Why do you think he says it's unthinkable?
Because if there's a God, then you gotta answer to that God.
That's right. Then you have a responsibility to that creator, and that creator might have written a book called the Bible that you would have to believe. And if you have to believe in that, then you can't believe in yourself. Pretty amazing, but that is the crux of evolution. I mean, he gives it to you right there in one simple sentence.
Well, and that Darwin would let this be said in the front of his book.
Well, this was the 100th anniversary.
The other 100
Yeah,
years.
he was dead. He evolved
Yeah.
to the Hades.
Proved and unprovable. We believe it because the only alternative is special creation. And that is unthinkable. I mean, you're not even allowed to think that maybe there's a creator? The only alternative, he's right, by the way. The Russian atheist astronomer came to America and spoke at one of the universities, and he started off his speech, he said, folks, either there is a God or there isn't. I thought, boy, this guy's brilliant. He nailed that point right on the head. I got to give him credit for that one. And then he said, both possibilities are frightening. I thought, wow, that's a good statement. You see, if there is a God, we better find out who he is and find out what he wants and do what he says. If there is no God, we're in trouble. We're hurtling through space around the sun right now at 66,000 miles an hour, and nobody's in charge. That's a scary thought. It's real simple. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
From heaven and gives life to the world.
Give us this bread.
Give us this bread. I am the bread of life. Those who come to me will never be hungry. Those who believe in me will never be thirsty. Now I told you that you have seen me, but will not believe. Everyone whom my Father gives me will come to me. I will never turn away anyone who comes to me. Because I have come down from heaven to do not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And it is the will of him who sent me that I should not lose any of all those he has given me, but that I should raise them all to life on the last day. For what my Father wants is that all who see the Son and believe in him should have eternal life. And I will raise them to life on the last day.
All right, you ready for a little break?
Sure.
Go ahead and take a break.